government access channels available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well. Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film,
welcome. It's Tuesday, November 9th. Welcome to our Conservation Commission meeting. I'm the chair, Andrew Foss, and why don't we just go down and we'll start down here and introduce ourselves. We have some new faces on the commission. And so please introduce yourself.
Thanks, I'm Daryl Brown.
Good evening, Nick Campion. I'm Connor Madison.
Trevor Matera.
Don Clement.
Dave Short.
Tom Patterson.
And Kristen Murphy, Natural Resource Planning Commission.
All right, thank you. Are there any public comments not related to the Rose Farm project? Start there. Okay, seeing none, we are going to continue our review of the standard dredge and fill application. Actually, is it a standard? We have that here, but it's the state wetland permit application and impacts associated with the construction of a 41-lot residential subdivision, also known as the Rose Farm project. We reviewed this last month at our meeting. We had public comment and a presentation by the applicant, and we're going to continue that discussion this month. We have a fairly narrow focus for tonight's discussion. Following up from last month, the crux of the matter as I remember it, and we can get into this, certainly there's some openness for debate here about what we're actually discussing, but from my point of view, we comment on the state wetland application that you've submitted to DES, and so we are going to provide them with some letter after this meeting with our opinion on the application that they already have received. And we're looking at those state criteria for the direct wetland impacts for this project. And the crux of it is the road crossing to access the buildable upland area and the alternative design that was proposed. And we're trying to evaluate, part of this wetland application is something called avoidance and minimization. And we wanted to look more into this alternative crossing last month because it relates to the avoidance and minimization as it relates to the wetland application. Does that sound like a fair summary of where we left it? So there was a fair amount done regarding this alternative analysis, but all that information wasn't provided to us in that initial packet. So in the meantime, we have submittals of the third-party wetland review from Patrick Seecamp that we discussed at length. We have a follow-up memo letter from Mark Jacobs, the project's wetland scientist. We also have public comment that was submitted in our packet from the abutters. So unless anyone wants to add anything from the commission, I guess I would turn it over to the applicant to start us off, and then we'll get into public comment and further discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a reminder, my name is Kevin Baum. I'm attorney for the applicant, Exeter Rose Farm, LLC. With me tonight are Mark Jacobs, our wetland scientist, Keith Patterson, who's one of the owner representatives, and Jack McTee, who's the project engineer. I thank you for your summary. That is our understanding as well, and that's how we prepared tonight. We have made a presentation. Our understanding is that the review here tonight is really limited to review of the wetlands permit and answering the specific questions that were raised at the last meeting, primarily relative to the alternative. Since that time, we have provided two responses. One is a response to the Steckler letter regarding the alternative access, and I'm sure you've all received that and hopefully have had a chance to review it. Mark will summarize that briefly tonight. And also, Jack has provided a response to Dr. Rosine's a letter that was submitted to DES. Our intent, based on the commission statements last time, is to not dig into alteration of terrain. We have an engineer here to answer any questions, but our take, and my understanding is the commission agrees, is that except where there are direct nexus to wetlands, that is an alteration of terrain issue to be determined by DES, and though we recognize there may be some difference of opinion between two professionals here, we think the proper, though we're happy to answer any of your questions, we think ultimately the arbiter is going to be the regulatory agency, which is DES. So, and then lastly, so we provided those two responses, and then lastly, I believe at the meeting, although you certainly didn't have a chance to review it, you received a copy of the CCAMP third-party review letter that was provided and done as part of the planning board process, which did address those, the alternative access. So again, the goal tonight is primarily to answer any questions the board has, provide any additional information you might need. And with that in mind, I'll turn it over to Mark to briefly review his response.
We're getting some feedback here. I don't know which mic it is, but.
Thank you, Kevin. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. As Kevin said, I'm the wetland scientist of record for the project. I'm also a certified soil scientist and certified professional erosion and sediment control, and I've been practicing in New Hampshire for going on 36 years. Presumably you've had an opportunity to read my October 29th letter regarding response to Mr. Steckler's letter, primarily addressing fragmentation concerns and the analysis of alternatives. I won't go through that letter, but I'm happy to entertain any questions going forward. But I did have a few remarks I would like to say. I also have brought that presentation with me from the previous meeting, so if the discussion requires it, we can certainly upload that and review that, certain elements of that as the commission sees fit. The analysis of alternatives involves evaluation of quantitative and qualitative data. For that reason, analysis of alternatives can be a somewhat subjective process. We've provided quantitative data in the form of proposed impacts for each alternative. We've provided qualitative data in the form of a wetland functional analysis, which the conclusions of which the abutters have agreed with. However, you have differing opinions from project proponents and project opponents regarding which alternative avoids and minimizes maximally. You have myself and the town's peer reviewer indicating that we believe we've chosen the alternative that avoids and minimizes to the greatest degree possible, and you have two opposing opinions who disagree with that. We believe we've met the performance standards to be permitted to cross Norris Brook and to provide access to an otherwise buildable area so that we can construct this project, and we believe we've done so in a manner that minimizes impact to areas under the jurisdiction of the state. If you agree that we've properly evaluated the alternatives and that we've chosen the alternative that meets the rules, we hope you'll submit a letter to DES that indicates that. If not, that's fine too. Either way, we'd like to get to the point where the regulators that are in charge of administering the law and the associated regulations can review the material submitted and make their own decision, the differing professional opinions you have notwithstanding. Do you have any questions for me regarding my October 29 letter?
No, not at this point. No.
So, I guess do you want to talk specifically about why?
I think the letter speaks for itself.
Okay.
I think the letter is very clear. It addresses point by point the concerns that Mr. Steckler raises. For example, he talks about habitat fragmentation. Our proposed crossing is 20 feet downstream from an existing concrete weir structure. And it's within a stretch of Norris Brook that has 3 other crossings on it. The railroad, an existing Oak Street extension, and the weir I just mentioned. So to suggest that we're going to fragment the habitat excessively is a stretch. I'm not sure how else to put it. Regarding analysis of alternatives, for example, Mr. Steckler says he agrees with the conclusions in the wetland functional assessment, and yet he's asking us to direct our impacts at a stream that's part of the same system and has the same functional attributes as the Norris Brook crossing. And that was pointed out by the peer reviewer as well back in 2018, that he believes it's part of the same system. And so it has equal, if not better value, functional value than the Norris Brook riparian area. So again, we're in the weeds, if you will, on the subjective or qualitative part of the impacts being proposed, and you have 2 professional opinions suggesting that we've minimized impacts both qualitatively and quantitatively, and you have opposing opinions suggesting otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, your memo goes through a lot of good points. There's it's not a full design, correct?
No.
Because it doesn't also, one of the things it doesn't include stormwater treatment.
Right. If it did, the impacts would be even greater than what's been calculated to date. Because given the topography in the area and the need to treat stormwater, and you have to work with gravity, you can't make water run uphill, so those stormwater BMPs would need to be down adjacent to the crossing or along the Oak Street extension, the existing Oak Street extension. And as you can see from the graphics in my letter, there's wetlands on each side of that road currently. That road would obviously need to be expanded, so there'd be additional impacts there. And then there would be impacts to design the stormwater management that would be needed to relocate or locate the road in that area. So that'd be above and beyond those numbers that you see in my letter.
Right. And there's also the other points you make are sort of safety-wise regarding the S-curve that would need to be, and the slopes make it, from a design perspective or a road perspective, less
Right. And
palatable.
I'm not an engineer, I'm not a PE, I'm not really qualified to speak to those. If we want to get into the weeds on those elements, Mr. McTighe would probably have to speak to those. But the important point is that those are considerations in this alternatives analysis. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the environmental considerations are paramount. Impacts to those areas under the jurisdiction of DES and the commission are paramount, but safety also does factor in, to be sure.
Okay, one of the things that came up in the previous discussion of this was the planning board meeting in 2019 was the crossing, the proposed crossing of Rose Farm Lane. So it's Rose Farm Lane's the proposed crossing, and we'll call it the Steckler alternative or the Oak Street extension alternative. That the Rose Farm Lane crosses downstream, and is it a tier 3? There was some discussion of this crossing being a tier 3 crossing at the lower portion, but if it crossed at the upper Oak Street extension existing crossing, it would actually be a lower tier crossing?
It would be. The Rose Farm Lane crossing as proposed is actually tier 2. It gets kicked into tier 3 because there's floodplain involved and a rare, threatened, and endangered species habitat on the site. So that elevates the category of review, basically.
At that site, but if it was the other alternative, it would all still be tier 3, or?
No, it wouldn't be tier 3. Be either tier 1 or tier 2. But it would still be elevated for the same reasons that the other crossing gets elevated to a major impact. This crossing, the alternative crossing, would also get elevated.
Okay, and I know probably since 2019, actually the wetland rules got readopted and revised. I don't know so would there be a substantive change to the application, the wetlands application, if at the alternative crossing was the submitted crossing?
No, the application that before you reflects the rules that were promulgated in December of 2019, so it meets the current standards. In fact, it met those standards with the previous design before we upgraded to the 24-foot open bottom box culvert, even at the 16.
But it wouldn't change it from a major impact to a lesser, or would?
It would have, actually. We would have, before the rules changed, things would have been easier. It would not have been elevated.
But now, with the current rules, they would both?
Yes, both crossings.
Okay. Not that, I don't know that if that matters, but there was some confusion about this stuff is complicated, and so the wetland applications are.
It mostly matters from the terms, and again, Mr. McTighe probably can speak to this better than I can, but it speaks to the design criteria that we're required to meet for the actual culvert size, etc. So.
Okay.
That's primarily the impact.
Does anyone have any comments or questions for Mr. Jacobs before we go to the public comment? Awfully quiet.
No.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, I'll open it up for public comment. If anyone wants to stand up, come to the mic, you have to say your name.
Hold on, it's gonna take me a minute.
Take your time.
Maybe we can bring the microphone to It's a portable mic. It's
Portable mic,
portable
yeah,
than you
yeah.
are.
Thank you. Thank you,
Why
that's
don't you be
easier.
comfortable?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jen Legere from 6 Forest Street. This is the anniversary of the 4 years that we've been doing this. One of our original meetings in the middle school. You requested at our last meeting to have Mark West and Rob Osteen both available to speak to their memos that they have written. So we've made sure that both of them are here tonight for any questions that you may have.
My name is Mark West. I was asked, and I'm a wetland scientist, and I was asked by the neighborhood group to get involved a couple years ago. And I'm here tonight to clarify, first of all, Mark Jacobs' response has more information about an alternative than we previously had in front of the planning board during their review. And this is what we were looking for in the first place, was what exactly does that alternative look like? And the reason it's important is, as Mark pointed out, there's different levels of wetland systems. And with these new rules, there's something called a priority resource area. It's a catch-all resource area that includes prime wetlands, 100-year floodplain wetland systems. The species habitat, a variety of things that the state said, these are priority resource areas. We're treating them differently than other wetlands. And that's an important issue because the crossing has to cross, as designed now, a priority resource area. And if it was switched up to this other location, it would not be in that priority resource area. As far as I could see on the plans and the maps were figures, and I don't know, and Mark can maybe point this out, whether the priority resource area was shown on the design engineered plans. I must say that with over 300 pages of documents, that there was a lot to review to understand exactly what's going on. But his response does show more information and actual calculations of the difference in square footage of impacts, which before were mentioned, but there was no, and I guess the one thing I don't know if I've seen, and it may be something I missed in this whole package, was whether there was ever a road layout with the stormwater and how it would really be designed. And I understand it's tight and you'd be impacting on both sides of a road or choose a side. You also would need to use little pieces of uplands, just like they're using pieces of uplands in the design they're doing, where you see a little rain garden along a narrow stretch and you see, gravel wetlands and things like that. And they would have to do the same thing on this too. And they may even have to do some more innovative technologies like these storm tech systems that go in the road and things like that in order to do that design and to minimize it. But other than the square footage difference that he demonstrated, there was over 7,000 versus the other impacts. We haven't totally seen it, but we understand that there would be more square footage of impact, but it would be impacting directly adjacent to an existing impact. And so that's why we wanted to have a full evaluation of that, to truly understand. We understand the functions of the wetlands. He covered all those. It's which is a least overall impact to the functions of the wetlands. That's the final judgment call. As far as fragmentation and other things like that, I understand there's some disturbances along this stretch of the brook, and there's a lot of disturbances on the site. And I understand that that has some bearing on the functional assessment, on the ecological integrity, which was evaluated on the site of the wetland systems. However, a existing road is different than some of these dam structures and things like that are, don't actively have people or activity on them versus a whole new road system that does have a new set of activities that don't exist within the system now. So within the system now, you have the Oak Street extension, then you do have the dam weir structure, but you don't have any other disturbance all the way down to the railroad bed. And that's, I think, what Pete Steckler was getting to, is that is now going to be fragmented, that stretch. But I think the biggest issue is, can this avoid impacts to a PRA or not? And if it can't, because in the actual application alternative discussion, it was discussed that Oak Street extension couldn't be used because it couldn't meet current design standards. The question is, with this other alternative, could it, if it doesn't go all the way out where it has view issues and things like that, could it meet design standards, and could they do all the stormwater, and is the actual result the 3,500 more square feet of impact to an area right next to a road? And that is something this group wanted to make sure that the DES was able to evaluate as part of this review. Thank you.
Could I have a couple of questions for Mr. West?
Sure.
Evening, Mr. West. Mark, how are you?
I'm good.
Two things. Has the DES officially classified the area of the proposed crossing as a priority resource area?
They classified the portion of the 100-year floodplain of that part of the brook as PRA. And again, is it on the overall plan? The actual site plans? This group would know. But it's on Exhibit 2, Exhibit 1 or Exhibit 2 in the report. Not his October 29 report, but in the application. I think I have that right, because the application was done before that.
Do we have, this might be worth clarifying right now, just.
I understand the concept of the priority wetlands and resource, but I just want to know who makes that official classification, I guess.
Well, we report it to the DES and they confirm or deny it. Just like they will, it's been asserted by the abutters that the DES won't be privy to our analysis of alternatives, but I've copied them on these materials that you folks have, so they also have those materials. But the crossing, the alternative crossing...
I'm more focused on the proposed crossing, not the alternative, because the proposed crossing is not fully engineered. You didn't fully engineer that, am I correct?
We didn't fully engineer the alternative crossing.
The alternative.
The proposed crossing
I'm talking about the proposed crossing.
Is engineered.
I want to focus on the proposed crossing. That, Mr. West alluded that proposed crossing goes through what is called a priority resource area. I just wanted to know, is that classification of that, is that official, and who makes that classification? That's my question.
It's official.
Okay.
It involves both crossings. Both crossings involve priority resource area. And we would report that as such. We have reported it as such in our application, and that would be affirmed by DES during their review. They won't take our word for.
I understand. Okay. I'm not sure if I'm getting the answer, but that's okay. Thank you.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, the question is this is being called or referred to as a certain, again, I'm just looking at the proposed crossing of the development here that was before us, is that it's being referred to as a crossing in a priority resource area. I wanted to know who makes that classification? Is it an official classification? That's all. I mean, it's just like when we do prime wetlands, there's an official designation to prime wetlands. They're officially reviewed and they're officially designated. So is this does this get done the same way as a prime wetland?
No, it gets done differently. It gets designated based on, at least initially, based on some of the GIS information that's available through the department. And it can get fine-tuned as it needed to do on this site, but the proposed crossing is a priority resource area because it involves a small amount of 100-year floodplain and because it involves rare species habitat.
So it is. It is officially a priority resource area. Okay, that's what I was trying to ascertain. And thank you. The other question, another question was more of a comment, Mr. West, that when you talked about the design standards for Oak Street Extension, when you refer to those design standards, those are town design standards. So the Oak Street, any work on that road or a road has to meet town standards. There's nothing to do with the state. We understand that.
I understand, but
okay.
That's what was written in the description of the alternative, that it did not meet design standards.
Right.
And I believe that's what Mr. Jacobs was referring to, but that's what he was.
Yeah, and I remember from the planning board, it did not meet design standards for the town. Okay, Oak Street Extension as a viable access. Okay, thank you. Thank you, I'm sorry.
If I may, I'd like to clarify two things, though, just to make sure everybody understands. The alternative access being proposed by people in opposition to this project also involves a priority resource area. Okay, so
the priority resource area is being defined as the 100-year floodplain of Norris Brook, so it's coming up along.
No, the 100-year floodplain does not extend up to the second cross, to the alternative crossing being proposed, but it does involve rare species habitat. So it's still considered a priority resource area. And additionally,
it's the 100-year floodplain of the Swampscott that extends up?
No.
No, you're saying?
Yes, the 100-year floodplain from the Swampscott extends up underneath the railroad tracks, up into the site, all the way to the base of the
proposed crossing.
Right. Well, basically to the base of the existing concrete weir structure that impounds that pond.
And so the existing, or the alternative crossing does not have that feature, but because of the rare species, that is what will...
Still considered priority resource area.
Okay.
And I'd also like to clarify that virtually all the materials in my letter from October 29th were previously presented in front of the town back in 2018. So there's very little new material there.
Okay, so that was an interlude. We're still in public comment.
Okay. Alrighty. Probably a good time for me to jump in then. I am Dr. Robert Rosine. Do you mind if I take off the mask or should I leave it on? It's okay to, right? Yeah, okay, good. Thank you. So at the last public hearing, I was not able to attend, and from what I understand, there were some questions regarding a memo that I'd written prior. Sorry, I should introduce myself. So Robert Rosine, I'm working with Rose Farm on this project and have been involved in reviewing the various elements since kind of its inception here. Maybe rather than reviewing the entire memo, what I'll do is just sort of highlight a couple of things and then maybe comment on a few things that I've heard tonight that I think are immediately relevant to the two pieces. So the first one here is I guess is that where we left this last several years ago, from my perspective, it does not appear that things have changed substantially. So, the majority of my involvement has been at the planning board level. A decent amount of this does certainly involve what I would consider to be jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission, for sure. One comment to that is Attorney Baum makes the assertion that because wetlands are going to be reviewed and stormwater is going to be reviewed under AOT, that the Conservation Commission need not concern themselves with those issues. I'd suggest I think that's not the case. It's rare that groundwater and stormwater runoff don't affect wetlands and natural resources. So if that were the case, then any time an AOT or a DES permit would be involved, then you could make the claim that the Conservation Commission doesn't have a role in that, and there certainly is a large overlap there. The two primary things that I've identified for my concern that I think that the Conservation Commission should be interested in is the first is the lack of channel protection, and this is an AOT piece, but it also extends far beyond that, really, into the natural resource protection. So the purpose of channel protection volume is the idea that you basically maintain a certain level of flow before and after for sensitive habitat. And channel protection volume essentially is what prevents a stream from unraveling. And we know we have erodible soils. We know we have sensitive resource areas, and these are all items that you would expect to have significant impacts as a result of the lack of channel protection. So these are the first types of things that we tend to see and concern ourselves with when we look at the impacts from urbanization. And I'm a little surprised, frankly, that here we are 2 years later and we still have the same issue. I'm surprised that the applicant hasn't addressed these issues. What we see is that in both cases, prior application and in this application, we're still not meeting that standard for channel protection volume, which is a 0.1 acre feet increase. We're greater than that. We're about a 0.26 acre feet increase. So those items I would think would be something that the board would want to concern themselves with. Maybe that's kind of my first point. If you'd like, I can kind of pause there and answer any questions you might have on that before I move on to the second item.
Yes, may I ask Dr. Rosine a question? The lack of channel protection that you've talked about, how do you provide for channel protection? I mean, you're stating that there's going to be a lack. It's going to be a lack of channel protection.
Yeah.
Which I understand. Not arguing with you on that. But how do you provide?
How do you provide that?
For channel protection?
Sure. Yeah, so the issues with respect to channel protection volume, how do you achieve that? And this is one of the things that, again, I'm a little surprised that 2 years later we're still talking about this. These are issues that we can deal with. Is the applicant's assertion that there's limited stormwater management that they can do on site in terms of infiltration and filtration. So what does that mean? We're talking about infiltration trenches. We're talking about dry wells around homes. We're talking about bioswales and bioretention systems. And some of what what the current project has are things like gravel wetlands, which are a tremendous pollutant load reduction tool. They're very good. It's like having a great muffler on your car or a really good scrubber on the stack for a plant. But what it's not doing, what it's doing, it's removing the nitrogen, which is of concern for the Great Bay. But what it's not doing is providing volume controls. So the volumetric controls, to answer your question, are what we need to focus on for channel protection volume. Volumetric controls, a lot of these things are very, very simple, and we've talked about them before, and we're talking about them again. But a great example, and actually I'd like to quote something directly out of the DES letter, which was to say, if topography allows for filter media with berming of basins, then groundwater recharge, i.e. infiltration, needs to be considered more closely, even with high seasonal high groundwater. So the 25% of the developable area is type A and B soil. So that's sandy soils that are going to get reasonable infiltration. And where we have buildable house lots, these are locations where we can easily do groundwater infiltration. Dry wells where, particularly when we're talking about rooftop, we're only looking at 1 foot of separation. That's not 1 foot, that's about 3 inches, but we're only looking at 1 foot of separation from these systems. And they can be made very shallow. It's just similar in many respects to leach fields. So that's my first point. And unless there are any other questions, I'll go on. Yeah, okay. So the second item really is the idea of the non-compliance with state requirements for treatment, and so I already mentioned gravel wetlands, but the applicant, and we've just heard it again from Mr. Jacobs, is that there's limited places that we can do this, meaning that a new road in this particular area necessarily implies wetland impacts. It does not. A new road or upgrading Oak Street Extension does not necessarily imply new impacts. It doesn't. That is if you are choosing to build your stormwater management on the outskirts of it. But there are lots of examples, of which several I cite in my memo, of where we are now in areas where we have limited space, where we're doing the designs in the roads. Dover's doing it, Stratham's doing it, Portsmouth's doing it. Basically, and Mr. West mentioned chambers under the road. That's just one type of example, but we do infiltration within our roadways. It provides for a way to provide the high-level treatment that we're looking for and minimize impacts. And the reason why I think we're not doing that here is because we're talking about the impacts to the natural resources. If it were limiting our buildable area, we would be putting them under the road, meaning that when it's the dollar for buildable lots is there, we do that. And that's exactly my experience. When I've designed them that way, it's because you want to put every little bit of buildable area above ground, and you do not want to have to put ponds in or something that you can put a house in instead. I think just to kind of close on that idea, to me, it's not persuasive that there are no other feasible alternatives. We really, there are a lot. They've been presented here before. Some of them we've touched on again tonight. And I would just like to say again that from my perspective, that this absolutely is something that the Conservation Commission should concern themselves with, and the fact that AOT is regulating stormwater and wetlands does not mean that the runoff and these various elements shouldn't be of concern to the Commission, I would hope, in terms of both wetland impacts and natural resource protection. Okay. Thank you very much.
Can I ask another question of Dr. Rosine? This comes from all the times that we worked together on projects that I never understood what you were trying to sell, and then it took a while for me to figure it out. The infiltration in the roads, and I understand that. Yeah, are you suggesting that is a good means to manage the stormwater? Not so much for quality, but for quantity. And if that was, are you suggest, well, that's putting words in your mouth, but are you suggesting that that's probably a good means for stormwater management in the proposed road or the alternative road, or either?
Either. What I'm suggesting is that in my opinion, the applicant's been pretty non-responsive to these ideas that we can get better stormwater management in there. We've added a small porous pavement, which I do porous pavements all over the country. I'm a big fan of them. In my opinion, this is not a great location for it. You have one small isolated area. Usually the places where they're most successful are where it's part of like a commercial development, and you have, a routine operation and maintenance contract. You have people coming in every year, not a small little application where it's not going to be maintained. So these are not the types of places where you find success very well.
Right.
I think there's a lot of options that could really improve this. Roadway infiltration is one of them, where it's actually under the road. A house lot where you can do dry wells and infiltration systems around it. The separation issue is really not an issue, because when we cut 300 or 400 yards for a cellar hole, that 300 or 400 yards is just built up around the house, and it raises everything 2 or 3 feet, 4 feet, sometimes more, especially when it's wet, because everybody likes to have an under drain under the foundation. So typically we pick the foundations up as much as we can.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And to the point, I think, on the alternative, Oak Street, if the Oak Street extension, the alternative concept, that there'd be no impacts. I think there would be some impacts, because, again, if the road doesn't meet standards, town
Yep.
standards, it's going to have to be widened. I can't remember what the width is today, but the town standard is significantly wider. So there would be impacts to bring that road up to town standards.
It's a great point, and thank you for separating the issues. I'm referring more to the impacts that would be associated with stormwater management. But you're absolutely right. That the additional impacts from bringing the road up to standards, to town standards, there is that, of course. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
You had also mentioned initially with the gravel system addresses the water quality.
Yeah.
And this is addresses quantity. Does it also address quality?
It can, yeah, it can. So let's see. It depends a little. Quality depends on which one we're talking about: nitrogen, phosphorus, solids, oils and grease, things like that. So subsurface. So I think the answer is, unfortunately, it depends. So it's not always a simple answer, but the answer is yes. It can, for sure, it can be done. But it's just a matter of finding the right mix of BMPs. Stormwater management practices to achieve both your quality goals as well as your quantity goals. And what I think this project has done quite well is they've dealt with their quality goals, and they do that with a gravel wetland, which really it's a powerful system. It's a great way to do it, but they haven't dealt with their quantity goals. And they don't necessarily need the gravel wetlands if they're doing some of these other forms that do both quantity and quality. Did that answer your question, kind of, maybe?
Sort of. Yeah.
Sort of, yeah. I think that was sort of my answer, is it's a little bit sort of. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
But it is it's a component in one way or another.
It is a component for sure.
Yes.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, when it comes to terms of nitrogen,
Yeah.
gravel wetlands are think like 95%.
My name's Jack McTighe. I just wanted to address those comments that just came out. There's a lot of things, a lot of factors involved. That's why we have the state regulatory agency to help sort through things, different ways, different opinions. One of the things, with my first submission to AOT, is I had infiltration in the underneath the porous pavement, and they actually had me take it out because they were more concerned with nitrogen treatment than they were for infiltration. Since then, I've just talked with them, and they're going to allow me to put it back in, but it'll be a waiver. But they really are pushing the gravel wetlands because they are more concerned about the nitrogen than they are about the other aspects, the volumes and stuff like that. He talks about storm techs and stuff like that, which are great systems. I actually used one under the road in Portsmouth, like he was talking about, but the one I used on the road in Portsmouth was on a private road. Have you had public roads approved with this?
I have not.
He hasn't had any public roads approved with this.
Dover has, though.
Oh, Dover, but in Portsmouth, and I'm pretty sure most DPWs are very resistant to putting storm techs underneath their roadways. It would be a great solution for me to have that tool in my toolbox if that's a possibility to put it underneath the roads. But it's been stated from other DPWs, Portsmouth especially, because I had another project in there on Beverly Hill Road, which they have actually asked us not to put it underneath the road. And most DPWs don't want that as a maintenance issue. They don't want to deal with having these chambers on the roads because if they fail or something like that, it means the whole road fails. Other thing, putting those underneath the systems, you have to raise the road higher because you have underneath the road are all your utilities. You got your electric, you got sewer, you got water. You have to have 5 feet of cover for your water. You have to have 6 feet of cover for your sewer. These all are things that have to fit in this roadway. And you try to narrow that footprint down so that you can get the roadway through there. But if you put those in there and you try to put an underground treatment system in there, they conflict with each other. Believe me, I fought this in that project I was telling you about. I was able to push the utilities outside the roadway to do this. In this case, if I push the utilities outside the roadway, I lose the whole purpose of putting it under the roadway, and then now impacts more wetlands. And he talked about treatment things. I mentioned it briefly, but AOT really pushes for anaerobic action for treating nitrogen, which means that it'd have to be like a gravel wetland, bioretention with an internal reservoir storage. It has to be they have certain ones they really like for using for nitrogen. Infiltration is not one of those ones. Were there any other questions that you guys have that you wanted to ask me?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I promise this will be the last. You don't want to hear dueling engineers. I'm sorry. I'm very familiar with the gravel wetland design. I wrote the spec for that. I also wrote the spec for the bioretention for the internal storage reservoir when I was the director of the UNH Stormwater Center. The infiltration within the roadway does not have to be done just by chambers. The ones that are done up in Dover are just with perforated pipe and stone. The ones that we did over in Stratham are also just perforated pipe and stone. It's true that there's a lot of concerns about chambers. I don't think I would put them under a road in certain instances as well. But this is where engineering innovation is required, and we're not necessarily working to manage the 100-year storm or a big storm, why we might use chambers. We're actually just talking about trying to bump up the infiltration amount, the recharge. And there are ways, I get the internal storage reservoirs, I get all that, but there are ways we can link this stuff in series with infiltration that works just fine. So I'll leave it at that. To me, this is just a matter of engineering innovation, and we build crazy things all the time if necessary. And it's just a question, are we making it necessary or not? Thank you.
I think,
All right, thank you. Are there other public comment?
June February, Chestnut Street. During the planning board process, there was a lot of talk about a sewer pump station to be built in a low spot on this property. It was revealed during that process that the station was proposed in an area that is predicted to be inundated in some of the climate change models in the Sea Rise report that the town commissioned a few years back. The planning board did not have issue with building a sewer pump station in that location that could be underwater in 50 years or less, but I am wondering if its location factors into the wetland permit. It's my understanding that the commission's task is to evaluate and comment on the wetland permit, and I'm surprised that there has been no mention of the sewer pump station. The Conservation Commission's main charge is to protect Exeter's natural resources. On page 27 of the Exeter Master Plan, it says, as storm frequency and severity is expected to increase, the flood zones adjacent to even small streams will play a major role in protecting private property and public infrastructure. As an Exeter resident, I'd like to see fragile wetlands and the Great Bay Estuary protected. As a result, I have attended many of the information meetings and went on the site walk offered by the engineers. During the first meeting, this development was soundly defeated because it failed to meet many of the requirements for this type of development. What should have happened at that point was to remove it from consideration. But since then, I've also noticed a disturbing trend during these meetings. The developer made multiple decisions to continue spending inordinate amounts of time and money to keep trying for approval. They asked for and received a large number of waivers because they didn't meet requirements. At a couple of the final meetings, the developer implied that the development should be approved because they had spent so much time and money on it. Even in the last Conservation Committee came the statement that the owner of the land had bought a separate parcel of land for a potential road, implying that the development should be approved because the owner had chosen to purchase this extra parcel. It's my understanding that the Conservation Commission is accountable to the town, not to the poor business decisions of the developer and the landowner. I'd like to end with a warning in the master plan. Quote, threats to water resources often come in the form of, quote, paying for history's mistakes. I'd hate to see this development eventually become just another instance of Exeter having to pay for history's mistakes.
Is the pump station, proposed pump station in a wetland? Is it wetland impacts from the pump station?
Well, you can answer about the wetland. I was just going to say, this is Jack McTighe, TF Moran. When it was discussed about the rising sea levels, that one of the things you have to look at is elevation. The existing elevation, correct, that would be underwater, the existing elevation. It's 10 feet higher than the existing elevation there. So it is not being threatened by the rising seawater.
But is there a wetland impact to the proposed sewer pump station? That's what this board is really dealing with tonight, is wetlands impact or wetlands permit.
This is yet another issue that was dealt with and put to bed during the planning board process back in 2018. There will be no wetland impacts to construct the sewer pump station, first and foremost. Secondly, I forget I believe it was modeled, the flood elevation was modeled to use the projected sea level rise data, and there were still 4 feet of freeboard for the sewer pump station at the worst case scenario. So.
That's not a situation, an issue that fails a lot of our pump stations in town, because with climate change, global warming, and sea level rise, there are a lot of facilities that are going to be threatened by this if in 30 to 50 to 100 years, 30 to 50 to 70 years, if this continues. So it is a concern. I think it's a town-wide effort on how to manage this and move forward. How do we prepare for the things that are going to occur? But in terms of, is this particular facility, is it creating a wetlands impact? If it isn't, then from a wetlands hearing perspective, there's no, we don't really speak to that. But your other points are well taken.
I would like to issue a bit of a correction as well, now that I think about it. There was a very small wetland impact associated with the construction of the sewer pump station. It's actually for the placement of a generator and the pad for that generator and where it had to go. We actually asked to move that generator and the associated pad, and the DPW was very firm of where they wanted it to go, and as a result, it requires, I want to say, about 10 square feet of impact.
Okay, thank you.
In that particular area. So, but the sewer pump station in and of itself doesn't require any wetland impact. And it has been designed to try and to accommodate some of these projected sea level rises with storm surge out 50 or 100 years.
Yeah, and this pump station, when it goes online, if it goes online, is going to be the town's responsibility. It's going to fall under the Water and Sewer Department. So, it's something the town's going to own. The town's going to have responsibility for managing it, for protecting it from future sea level rise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it, my understanding was that it was going to be part of the HOA.
Excuse me. Could someone bring a microphone to, we can hear you, but the audience at home can't.
Is it? I thought in the planning board meetings, it was discussed as being part of the HOA responsibilities for managing the pump station.
I don't know, I don't remember, but typically the town does not want to have sewer facilities or water facilities that are using town resources like our treatment plant to be, they want them to be under the management of the town. We did that a few years back on another project, and it did not work for the town and cost the town quite a bit of money to take care of that. So I think the policy has been that if it's tying into a town resource, which is our treatment plant, our water service, that the town wants to manage or own, basically, those facilities.
And I believe with this project, the town intends to take over responsibility. So I remember that discussion in the TRC, the Technical Review Committee.
Okay, because I know in some of the original conversations, it was going to be part of the HOA, and I'm like, I'm a public water system operator, and I wouldn't want to deal with this, like, so.
So it's a public road. The town is also taking over the road. Not including the Oak Street extension. Is Oak Street extension currently a public road down to the spring?
The
debate.
public road portion would be up to the gate where the multifamily units will be.
Okay. Are there more public comment? Okay. Do we want to discuss, do we have any follow-up questions or comments for anyone here?
I can make a comment.
Yeah.
I've been making a lot of comments. This probably is more attuned to the alteration of terrain permit, but I want to discuss it anyways. I think that we should, or it should be recommended to DES that pre- and post-construction erosion control needs to be in place. Because I'm concerned in some of the documents that I read about erosion control, erosion in the wetlands complex and the brook. So I would like to see some very definitive pre- and post-construction erosion controls put into this project. Again, this is more of an AOT thing than a wetlands thing, but I'm just throwing it out there. The second is I think we've talked about water quality here, and I think we need to have some kind of a comment that I'd like to see a reduction, if not an elimination, of fertilizers being used on the in the development, and the salt on the roadways, which now I think the roadways I know is going to be the town. So, but I want to put that, I'd like to have that put in there, that we're trying to reduce or eliminate these contaminants from getting into the watershed. I spent some time reading and reviewing all the assessments that were in our package, one by the applicant, Mr. Jacobs, by Patrick Seecamp, by Mark West, and by Dr. Rosine. And all of them make very valid points and arguments regarding, one, the functionality of the wetlands and the watershed and the potential wetland impacts. So, I mean, you know, they're all very qualified wetland scientists, and they've made all have made valid points. In the end, my opinion and my judgment, it's my opinion, is that the proposed crossing in this plan will not create a significant adverse impact to the water quality of Norris Brook. And that adequate precautions have been put in place to accommodate the wetland and the aquatic resources. So I'm comfortable with recommending to the state, I'm comfortable in recommending to the state that we agree to this wetlands permit. But that's just my opinion, and that's just, you know, but I'd like to see some of these things put into the wetlands permit letter if we do that. We're going to do a permit letter. So we're going to do a letter to DES one way or the other. Mm-hmm. But these two items, I think, need to be addressed, and I'd like to see them addressed. And
erosion control, and then use of fertilizer and salt.
If I may, I'm sorry, just to clarify, I don't recall salt, but the use of fertilizer is prohibited. That was part of the planning board, and that is in the declaration of covenants. So.
I didn't review the planning board thing. Thank you.
We did. We knew you would.
It almost sounded like a motion.
So, yeah, I guess it's ultimately coming down to, do we feel that the alternative analysis was sufficient and their argument against the alternative is convincing? Those are my two questions.
Seems like in all the correspondence, there's pros and cons to both. And at the end of the day, it kind of seems like a wash. I don't think there's anything demonstrated on the alternative that's so markedly superior to the proposed that there's a reason to go that route. But, you know, ultimately DES is going to take a look at this too. And maybe they'll see something we don't see. But they're going to be the final arbiters anyways. I guess all we can do is offer our opinion, but it's, again, there doesn't appear to be anything overwhelmingly compelling in the alternative route, and some negatives to it also.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I feel like there's certainly no black and white answer here. I feel that in one case, I'm certainly not an advocate of inducing more or impacts on an area that hasn't already been impacted, but at the same time, the amount of impact we would probably see going with any other alternative is probably greater than what we'd be getting out of it in the first place. The design of the open culvert, the open crossing, the open bottom crossing, seems to be sufficient. But then at the same time, and with all due respect, just because an area in its entirety is already quite fragmented, I don't really buy into the argument that that is enough reason to continue fragmenting it, because I do believe that there would be additional fragmentation added to the system if you create a new crossing in the first place. But at the end of the day, I agree. I don't think there's any overwhelming evidence or reason to show that one is causing any deleterious quality to what we'd already be getting, as opposed to another one, if we're going to be crossing that wetland in any way.
I mean, the perfect world is the area stays intact.
Totally.
But that's not going to happen. So.
Yeah. Connor?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Mark, I don't know how much you've dealt with NHDES in this alternate route. Are they familiar with that at all, or are they just seeing your proposed route?
No, they'll see, I've copied them on all these materials. They're aware, assuming they've even lifted a finger on the application to date. I know they're pretty backed up presently as well, so they may not have looked at anything yet, but I've certainly made them aware of the alternative.
I got a question for Mark too. So the existing culvert under the extension, that'll be replaced with an open bottom as well? Is that correct?
The replacement of the 36-inch reinforced concrete culvert with the 3 foot by 4 foot, that's a closed bottom box.
That's a closed bottom?
Yeah, but we're doing stream simulation inside that.
And some of your correspondence also, you've been talking about, see if I remember this correctly, there was a lot there. Now, there's the width of the stream, and that the culvert, the box culvert, is going to be twice the existing condition.
Right.
Now, I remember there was some reference to not only aquatic passage, but land passage.
Right.
Is there going to be a shoulder in there?
Yeah.
As part of that?
So that channel on average is about 11 feet, between 10 and 11 feet to bank to bank. And with a 25-foot box, depending on where you measure it, because the stream channel isn't a straight shot,
right,
it angles a little bit. There's, don't quote me on the numbers, there's 6 to 16 feet of an upland bench. Well, it's just technically more wetland, it's just not a stream on one side, and a similar amount on the other side, again, depending on where you...
So there will be the ability for wildlife.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
Without getting their feet wet.
Without getting their feet wet, yeah.
And the box is 5 feet tall, so you'll probably be able to scoot under there yourself if you wanted to, if you hunch over, I would imagine. So.
Okay.
And that was a shelf on both sides, correct?
I'm sorry?
There was a shelf on both sides?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. These are good questions. Any other comments?
This may be just going into the weeds, and I apologize, Mark.
No worries.
NHB, they had some pretty vague questions about just contact. As far as American eel goes, I assume that open bottom satisfied their concerns?
Yeah, well, I don't have final feedback from them yet, but we've been working very closely with them since 2017-ish. And they've rendered lots of comments on the project by virtue of the alteration of terrain permit application. And we've incorporated all of their comments, I believe, yeah. Right, yeah, they want to deep some catch basins in the roadway, but the town wouldn't allow that, so we couldn't do that. And they wanted Cape Cod berm, I believe, and town wouldn't permit that either, so we are proposing sloped granite curbing as sort of a compromise, I guess is one way to look at it, but should accomplish much the same. Yeah, we're also upgrading that concrete weir and installing the fish ramp there to hopefully make passage for the eel easier. We're going to be repairing the breach in the weir structure and adding the fish ramp, as it were, for the eels as well. I don't have any reason to believe that Fish and Game, isn't going to eventually sign off, but they have not yet. So I don't want to get ahead of myself on that.
Just to clarify, Fish and Game did not want deep sump catch basins, and the town did.
Yeah, they don't want, yes.
Right, I'm sorry, what did I say? I said it backwards, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. And the Natural Heritage Bureau did recently just sign off on the project regarding rare plant issues. So I do have their blessing on the project, but we're still waiting on Fish and Game. So.
Just in terms of the vegetation in these crossing areas, I guess one concern I have about the Rose Farm Lane has a significant amount of clearing to get through there. That's been talked about as a mature forest in the upland section. So it is going to involve a fair amount of habitat change outside of the wetlands. Sort of in terms of light penetration into the wetland area and habitat fragmentation. That's the main concern I have about the proposed crossing versus using the existing crossing. There's already a lot of issues there, right? There's a large stand of knotweed adjacent to the
Oak Street
extension crossing, and I don't. So in terms of, while there's more wetland impacts, sort of the types of vegetation are fairly different in those different crossings. I don't know, we haven't really talked about that here in this part. Also, the alternative, there's a unnamed perennial stream, I believe, that would also be crossed
right,
in the
alternative, right.
And so there's pros and cons to that perennial stream crossing that we would be adding. Right. So while there's one crossing of Norris Brook, we're adding this small stream crossing, which would be a culvert.
I did not go into detail.
We know we didn't design, you haven't designed that.
Right, and I can tell you there's more forest cover that will be lost for the alternative access that's being proposed than there will be for the currently proposed access. The crossing of Norris Brook in that area, there's not a lot of tree cover immediately adjacent to Norris Brook because of the riparian habitat that it is. It's a lot of shrub.
You're saying in the proposed crossing there is not
as much. There's quite a bit of light penetration presently because there's a lack of canopy, tree canopy in the actual crossing area. Now the approaches, the upland approaches, that's definitely forested and trees will be lost to build the road in that area, to be sure. But the crossing where the alternative would go is forested throughout. So there'd probably be more. It depends on how you calculate it. If you calculate it versus number of trees or basal area of those trees, I suppose you might arrive at slightly different results. But if you just look in terms of strict numbers of trees, I think you'll find that the proposed crossing results in fewer trees lost than the alternative that has been advocated by others.
Okay, well, that's helpful. I don't know if that spawned, and is there any, there's an invasive management plan? I think, did we talk about that last month?
Yes.
I think we did.
The planning board required an environmental monitor during construction, and as part of their duties, where we know we're going to intercept, especially knotweed, during construction, we will implement best management practices according to DOT guidance and guidance from the university as well.
Yeah, I mean, I see that as a big issue.
Oh,
You're going to be
absolutely.
disturbing the stream. It's going to be flowing down, you know, the
absolutely.
possible transport of knotweed down down Norris Brook is not something, and you're disturbing a lot of areas. So I mean, I know Don mentioned the erosion control, and I would second that, erosion control and control of invasives and spread of invasives during the construction is a real potential on this one.
In the application package, there's a map, there's an actual map. We surveyed, I went out and
Yeah, I saw there's, right.
Right, and the surveyors came in behind me and surveyed the extent of knotweed on the site. So we have a map. In places, it's in your face. You can't possibly miss it unless you are blindfolded, I suppose. But in other places, it's not quite so apparent. So we mapped it all. There's a map in the application, and the environmental monitor will be tasked with making sure that those BMPs are initiated when construction is in or near areas that are contaminated with Japanese knotweed.
Okay, well, I mean, the other thing to think about, and you talk about it, Mark, in your letter towards the end about just safety. I guess in trying to make this decision of alternatives, I think of the safety of the public and drivers. And that's not obviously priority for the wetland consideration, but we're trying to balance a whole number of different things that are fairly qualitative. In terms of the slopes of these roads, you're saying the proposed road is about 6.9% in one direction, but the other direction it's
3.5.
3.75. Whereas the alternative is 7 degrees according to this in both directions.
Both directions, both approaches.
So the 7 on the proposed crossing, it's steeper going into the development than coming out of, and it's flatter coming out of it.
Because you're coming down to that existing, which is lower, it's like steeper on both ends. Where the
Yeah.
proposed, you're coming more to the level of, then you drop down. You drop down, come back into the belt. There's a little deep spot come back into the belt. I'm sorry. In the alternative, you got to go down a hill, then come back up a hill. And the proposed, you're almost level with the crossing. You come down at like 3.5, and then you go back up the hill to come up. So you both have a steep end coming into the actual housing part of it. It's just that the alternative has a steep both ways. Now you could eliminate that, but that would be bigger walls, more,
Well, and you've eliminated it by the 10 feet of fill that you need for the pump station, right? That's why it's lower, probably.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Because the town side of the crossing has to come way up for the pump station and utilities or whatever else it is. Yeah.
And it does eliminate, I'm sorry.
You were going to talk about safety. Probably one of the more major things is that if there's ever an emergency, there's 2 accesses into the current proposed alternative. If you are looking at just the alternative that they are presenting, it's only 1 access into the development. Why you would need that would be like if
trees fell or something drastic happened on the road and you had to bypass it, you could get there.
Or if there's a car accident on the culvert or something, or, yeah.
Yeah, at least this gives a second alternative, you know. It's just something to look at.
And it's more curvy, so there's additional curves in the alternative. Potentially, I'm gonna say the slopes, because you haven't designed the alternative, I don't know that that's fair to call the slopes any different, but it's clear from the design that the alternative has more turns. And if there's only one crossing, so it's sort of a lack of redundancy in that road network is less desirable.
Mr. Chairman.
Where do we go from here?
Chairman, I'm going to try to throw out a proposed motion.
Don, before you do, maybe identify the voters.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
There are 7 people here, but I'm not alternates.
Yeah,
Don't
Sure.
have to
Go ahead.
vote.
Yeah, before we make a motion, is there any other comments? We can close public comment. We've been sort of in a discussion, public comment phase.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll close public comment. In terms of who's voting, I guess Daryl doesn't vote. So there are 7 of us. We could all vote, but not everyone. I know some people weren't here at the last meeting and they don't need to vote. We do have I believe the 5 of us were here. So if anyone, I think it's up to any. Do we need to decide ahead of
So
time?
I would say if you're an alternate and you don't feel comfortable voting, there's a quorum present in full voting members.
Okay. Fair enough. Don?
So the motion would be that we have no objection to the permit request as documented, but we would like addressed the potential increased volume of Norris Brook and implement volume controls where necessary, or where required, and a plan for pre and post erosion control. Trying to take into consideration Dr. Rosine's point about the volume of Norris Brook, and so I think I would like to see us make a recommendation to DES that they address that and implement any volume controls to manage that.
I just, before we get to that, too, and sorry to jump in here if this is inappropriate, but also to the point that there's enough wetland impacts here to trigger compensatory mitigation. And I think we might have discussed that at the last meeting as well, but there has been.
Yeah, but that's the next item on the agenda.
Oh, is it? Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead then.
Skipping ahead.
Yes, jump right ahead. No, it's not, right?
No, we would want to.
Oh, we want to put that in the same motion?
Yeah.
I would believe so, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yep.
Totally in the right.
We're only writing one memo.
So what would that would be part of the motion that compensatory mitigation be
On Tamarind?
Yep. Yeah, so it would
Okay.
include exploring.
be included?
Yep.
Yep, I concur, yeah.
So there's the crossing Tamarind Lane, the culvert replacement, SAIDS ID 6459.
Yep.
Be explored, is that what you said?
Be explored, yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, as a local option for
Oh, yeah,
mitigation.
okay. I understand.
So we're saying this is a no objection. Was that what this started out as, Don?
That was my motion with these other recommendations to the,
It was a no objections with conditions.
With those conditions.
with those conditions.
And I did not hear salt. Did you mention limitations on
No.
road salt?
I did not. That's, yeah. A no salt, a very low salt, salting in the winter of the roads. Be required. Yeah, well, the town needs to follow good practices also. They don't always do that. So,
Do we want to acknowledge the alternative?
boy, when I voted, the permit, the alternative is not part of the permitting. The permit is the proposed road and the proposed project.
Okay, I'm asking the question, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just,
Right.
that's my answer, that's
Yeah.
my feeling. I mean, yeah, I'm just putting a motion on the floor.
Is that it? If that's it, I'll second it.
Does anyone have any comments, concerns?
Maybe, give me 1 second.
Yeah, I mean, we can take our time here. This is, yeah, this is a complicated project. And we kind of have come in at the end here. So I think we have done a lot in a fairly little amount of time for this, regarding this project, this month and last month.
So my hang-up is under the wetlands permit, section 4 alternatives, EVN WT 311.07B subsection 3. Could alternative design or techniques such as different layouts, different construction sequencing, or alternative technologies be used to avoid impacts to jurisdictional areas or their functions and values as described? I don't think so. But that doesn't mean I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think there's alternatives. I think the alternatives have been laid out.
Okay.
There's not a lot of flexibility in there,
Yeah, there's not.
you know?
And I guess we had this discussion already. I mean, in either case, we're making, we're not going to be completely avoiding the impacts in either way.
There's going to be an impact, yes. It's determining the significance or the degree of the impact. Or if we feel there should be no impact, then, it's a whole different, I think with the crossing with the open bottom culvert, I've seen the open bottom culverts used in another project, and they're very effective. I think Norrisbrook is crossed from the Swampscott River at Swayze Parkway and at Water Street just up a few feet. And I think both those culverts were replaced in the past 10 years, put in new culverts, and I think they were open bottom culverts there too. So the only thing that's not an open bottom culvert is the railroad crossing.
Right. Yep.
But
Yeah, it's just granite.
I think the open bottom box culvert makes the impact a little more tolerable, in my mind, my opinion.
All right.
Okay, well,
I mean, you want to...
so we have a motion. Kristen,
I understand what you're saying.
I don't know what I want to ask you, but I want to ask you something.
You want to ask her whether we need to do, you want to ask whether we need to
Do you
do a
need
roll
any
call?
clarification from,
So, Don, is it limitation of road salt? No road salt? I
Limitation.
mean, I do worry about, okay.
Yeah, it's limitation, because I don't think you're going to be able to...
there's no way we
eliminate
can eliminate road
But
salt
there are
on a
areas,
sloped road.
there are areas I've seen in town, sometimes from the state roads, that's called a low salt reduction area. And I'd like to see that applied to this entire development. So low salt reduction, there should be a low salt reduction area.
Kind of like towns do near water reservoir,
Yeah.
wellhead field.
Yeah, we do it on route, on Portsmouth Avenue by Wheelwright.
So we asked DPW to use as much discretion in the
Yeah.
use of salt as possible.
Yeah. Is that,
I mean, that's outside, this is a state permit, but
Right.
we certainly can raise this point with DPW, and certainly the applicant can as well.
So now that just confused me. You do want it in the memo? So the end result would be a wetland permit that would have a list of conditions, ideally incorporating the conditions that you recommend. And so
So you think that could be in a wetland permit? Yeah, okay. I'm not I don't claim to be an expert in wetland permit conditions, so Connor, you can help me.
Salt affects the wetlands. All right.
Okay, so we want that in. So we're at a place where we're talking about erosion control, salt usage,
invasive
including the invasive.
control, invasive management during construction. And increased volume controls where necessary.
And exploring the Tamarind Lane culvert replacement.
And the Tamarind Lane. Okay. So, Dave, did you second that?
Yes.
I think you did. So, but now I guess we vote.
So I'm sorry, can you give me those one, so
You want me to read?
we're recommending the approval with conditions, and the conditions were,
Inclusion of
No, we're not. We were
yeah, that's the motion.
to recommend approval, or we have no objection.
We have no objection.
That's usually what, we say no objections, but we are suggesting conditions.
No objection with inclusion of the following conditions?
Yes.
Yeah, we can have it say
Yes.
whatever we want it to say. They're just looking for our feedback.
yep. Okay, so I'm sorry, what the conditions, the list of
So
conditions
the
were?
Motion that, as I understand it, is that you are sending a memo, or a letter to the State Department of, DES, that you have no objection to the proposal with inclusion of, with the inclusion of the following conditions. That there will be pre and post construction erosion control measures implemented. That invasive control during construction will be managed to limit spread of invasive plants. That this area be treated as a low salt use area. That increased volume controls are implemented where necessary.
And that's related to stormwater.
Increased volume controls for stormwater management
Not just
are
flood
implemented where necessary, and that that you explore the local option for mitigation of Tamarind Lane culvert replacement.
Yep.
SADES 6459.
Do we get everything?
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Yeah, this is, yeah. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. So none opposed. Was there anyone abstain who did not vote? Did anyone not choose to vote? So everyone chose to vote. So that was a 7-0 motion passed. So do we hit this thing? I think we do.
You do.
Thank you.
So we will be in talks with you at a future date, maybe regarding the conservation land easement.
Yeah.
That would be the next thing, and from my perspective.
Yeah, I can, Chris and you and I can probably talk about that.
Okay.
We started it some time ago. Take it back out.
And I need to refresh it.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you for
Thank you for all the comment.
thoughtful consideration.
Mark, don't forget your water bottle.
Nice.
Good chance I will.
So,
It's a lot of reading I had last week.
Kyle?
I'm Kyle. I didn't know.
Oh, I'm so sorry,
No
yeah.
worries. So, hi, everybody. I'm Kyle.
Nice to meet you,
hi,
Kyle.
Kyle. Welcome.
You don't want to sit at the table?
Oh, well.
Be official, yeah, it's time to be official.
Timing.
So Kyle was appointed.
Yes. No, I don't blame you. I would have sat out in the hallway.
So Kyle was appointed at the last select.
Yeah, so Kyle, right, welcome to Kyle. He was appointed at the last meeting of the select board. We have are you here to discuss something, Mr. Anderson?
Hopefully.
Do you want to come up?
I'd love to if you.
Come on up.
And you've grown far greater in number than I anticipated, so I'm going to be shy. At least 2 copies. Sorry, Kyle. One of those. Pass it down. I think I have those on my phone if I need to refer to them at all, but I'm going to be very quick because we are getting late and I'm embarrassed to be here using your time, but I do very much appreciate it. And this is what the DOT wanted, so here I am. I'm going to do a little backstory because I know some of you weren't here a couple of months ago when I originally came. My name is Ben Anderson. I run the Word Barn on Newfields Road with my wife and kids. It's a gathering place for community events focused around music, literature, wildlife, and community fundraisers. And alongside everyone else, especially in the arts, we were hit really hard in March of 2020 with the pandemic, having to shut down. But like a lot of people with the pandemic, it forced us to look at things in a new light and figure out solutions, similar to outdoor dining, and find some great alternatives that worked really well that we didn't even consider. And one of them was our construction of a stage outdoors so we could safely gather and have some normal sense of being together again. But this was in the area where we were parking cars. So our solution to that was to use our lower field, which we had never used before because it did not have a connector roadway. But it did have a pre-existing old farm road to cross Newfields to get into Rains Farm that was there, and it's still there on both sides. And we used that, and we discovered what a beautiful thing. This is such a safer access point for people coming to our events. They don't have to navigate our notorious bad corner, but certified as up to all the standards as needed. But I'm sure you know that corner. I've hauled out more people than I can count in the wintertime, and they've hit our utility pole, taken out our sandwich board, you name it. It's a bad spot. This lower spot gives great sight lines and eliminates that necessity to turn on that corner, and is overall a benefit for public safety. We contacted the DOT, who said we were all good with this access point if we removed one roadside tree that stood on the Rains side of the property, about 3 feet from the road, which was directly smack in the middle of the sight lines needed. I approached the Rains Farm Stewardship Committee and ultimately came to the Conservation Committee, and we all sort of hummed and hawed because it was very clearly within the DOT's right of way, but you graciously agreed and gave me permission to remove that tree, which I did. And I went back to the DOT, and they said, that's great and everything, but you need a sight line easement to get everything buttoned up, and then you are good to go. So I came back here to the Conservation Committee a couple of months ago, and you all agreed that this area sort of seemed to be within the DOT's right-of-way, but graciously came up with the solution of an indefinite letter of agreement to clear that area, as I have been doing along 85, in hopes that it would suffice the DOT. I went back to DOT, and they said, that's no good. You need this sightline easement. So here I am back, unfortunately, here again today. Kristen had the really wonderful idea to get Jay Perkins from DPW out there to take a look at it. Maybe, I'm just a small peon property owner with the DOT, and maybe, DPW had some ability to talk some reason. Jay took a look at it. He was on the property for probably about 10 minutes because he said, this is ridiculous. It's so much safer. It's well within the DOT's right away, and I have zero issues with it whatsoever. See if you can't get Jim Hewitt out here in person to take a look at it. He's going to see this immediately as well. Well, I was unsuccessful in doing that, but I was successful in getting the DOT to furnish a sightline map, which is your page 1 of your document there, which shows where you can see the second drive for the lower field, and where the sightline cuts the Rains Farm conservation property in order to reach that 400 feet. And so what I did with that was I overlaid the map that Jay Perkins gave me, which is your page 2, which clearly outlines the the DOT's right-of-way, which you can see the sightline is within. Jay also kind of laughed, saying how the right-of-way actually kind of cuts through the front of Rain's barn.
Yeah.
But the running joke. But anyways, it is what it is, and it's there. I sent the map to DOT, and they said,
makes sense.
Well, that's not accurate enough. You need to get a land surveyor to do a study and write out the plan, or as we recommend, I'm guessing they had some sympathy for us and our pocketbook of saying, like, your better course is to go and get the Exeter site easement. And I was successful. They did ease up on their original site easement requirement, and they said, let's see here, I'll quote, they said, if Exeter was willing to grant a site easement at some consistent offset, like 5 to 10 feet in that particular area, we would be satisfied with the easement. So,
did you ask them why north of Rain Farm they've mowed?
I did. I used that as an example because they came back at me and said, it's not in our right of way because the stone wall is there, which you'll see on page 3. There's no stone wall, unfortunately, left anymore over time, erosion, road construction, and plowing. It's just an embankment with some stones. But if you go to the north of the barn, they just cut a 16-foot swath on either side of the stone wall. Now, I finally got an answer from them after I continued to use that example, and they finally took the position of saying, well, that was the town granted us permission to go on either side, so that's why we did.
Do they have an easement for that?
Yeah, well, and again, you can see on the maps, the categories, the boundaries, this is well within the right of way. So I'm here, I can get this buttoned up if you would just grant me the ability to keep this area clear, which is giving up nothing. It has no impact because DOT already has this ability and right to keep this area clear anyways. DOT essentially wants me to do the maintenance for them without the town ever saying, you can't do that, even though DOT could do it anytime they wanted anyways. I mean, it's this whole chicken and the egg, I don't know. I'm wheel spinning, I don't know. Further on that, the utility line runs over this area, and I was just contacted by the tree company, starts with an A, can't remember, contracted by Unitil, who they're coming through in a week, and they said, hey, do you mind? We're cutting 8 feet on either side of the line, 15 feet above the line, and we're going to cut through. And I said, well, all my lines are buried, except for one pole. But that reminded me that the utility line runs right over this area, which is going to also further ensure that area is kept clear.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. in any case, DOT has dug in their heels. I can only surmise that they don't like giving 2 driveway permits for a single property, because I would be jumping at this opportunity because it's far safer for the public at large. It's far safer for people coming to our events. It's also, people traveling north of that area, maintaining that brush gives a better clearance of rounding that corner.
Yeah.
And no offense to DOT, if you look at 85, I mean, if you go just towards Exeter, that next corner, the brush is right up against the road and it's higher than my truck. I don't know why they're not jumping at this opportunity, but this is what they want. Here I am, hoping for permission to do what.
Well, I don't know what, we can't grant an easement. I don't know that we have that power. I don't know what authority, I mean, we can certainly, we've given you a letter of support, and we could recommend, is it the select board?
Yeah, so conservation commissions don't own property, right? Property is owned by the town of Exeter. So in my interpretation, I believe the Conservation Commission cannot grant an easement because you're not the property owner. So
if I could only inquire on that though, because it's not giving anything up. It's nothing that's already, I mean, it's much like when I came in to ask to remove the tree, you granted permission to remove the tree without going to the select board. I am hopeful that, the worst case scenario is you do grant a recommendation that I can take to the select board. I'm trying to save that time in those steps. And
this seems crazy.
I mean, this is ridiculous. And I'm just asking for permission to keep that area clear, much like I asked to have to cut down the tree to make that area clear. I mean, you're not giving up anything.
totally understand that, Ben.
I was trying to keep it from escalating to this last time, but I think right now we're at the point where we have to make the recommendation to the select board and they have to do it, unfortunately,
Yeah.
And the concern is because this does become a recorded document, right? It is a legal instrument, and so that sort of does bump it up into a different level of authority than, and the commission, and we all support you keeping that clear. We all want that to be a safe means of egress. It's just not within the authority of the Conservation Commission.
So I'll make a motion that we support Ben's application for a sightline easement across the land that the town probably doesn't even own. But just in case we do, but we're in support of an easement being granted for sightline.
Okay. I greatly appreciate that.
Second?
And that recommendation goes to the board.
And that goes to the select board, yes.
I'll second that.
Drew?
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Okay, that motion passes.
Great, thank you very much. And again, I apologize for using your time with this, but I do appreciate it, so thank you.
Good luck next time.
Well, it's of importance to Rains Barn and everything, so thank you for bringing it up.
Daryl, were you wanting to, I don't know, I just feel uncomfortable making a motion to a memo to the select board.
I think that's wisest. I've never heard of an easement coming from its commission, so it's, that's the best way to do it.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yes, so Daryl can explain this conversation we just had.
Enjoy.
In 10 words or less. That's a challenge for anybody.
Yeah. Okay, I know it's getting late. Well, actually, we're doing okay, guys.
No.
We're doing okay.
That's my bedtime.
We don't have much left here. Oh, they haven't turned
So we do have a few more things we can run through. Hopefully, if people can hang on. The first one's a we punted on this last month, so there are a few things we do want to do. We have a research request at Henderson Swayze. Kristen, do you want to briefly explain?
Sure, so in your packet, I provided a description from the researcher. She is doing some interpretation of geological dating of glacial movement within New Hampshire, and has requested to be able to take rock samples. sounds like you just chip it off of these larger boulders. The size can be up to a fist, is what she described in her proposal. And so the area that she's interested in doing that is within Oakland's town forest.
Oh, Oakland's.
Yeah.
think it said
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No,
Within
Henderson, Swayze.
It's not going to
Within
destroy or
Henderson,
take
Swayze.
away Fort
Well,
Rock.
one thing her letter didn't say is how many samples she's
Mhm.
gonna take. So I would, if we, grant it, we should maybe put a limit on the number of samples.
How big were the samples? You
Let
said-
me,
Yeah, I want to
check.
follow up with her on
Oh,
a few
okay.
things, the number of samples and the specific locations before, and where on the boulders she's going to sample. There's a growing user base of rock climbers who are bouldering in Henderson, Swayze, and other areas in Exeter. We actually have some really amazing boulders for climbing. They're somewhat spread out and small, but they're a really valuable resource, and I wouldn't want her to damage any of those in a way that would impact people's recreational enjoyment of the boulders. So I think there is a way she could do it, but she would need to be cognizant of the boulder.
Well, when does she want to do it?
so she submitted this request in time for the last meeting.
Maybe it's something
So-
that she wants to get going on right away, or?
I suspect, I don't know. She
Maybe
didn't.
It's a master's thesis, so I imagine it's ongoing.
I mean, does she have time to take one of us around for a walk and just give us I mean, there's a radix.
Yeah.
There's a radix every place in there.
Is there another property that would be a better?
No, I think that's an ideal.
That's a perfect property.
No, I think there's fine, and there's a lot that are small enough they would no one would ever climb on them, or they're not the right angle or anything, so.
Oh, there's so many places to take a sample from that.
So, yeah, I think could we just approve this with, we could have one point person just be in touch with her regarding
that's all.
The number of samples and location.
But that person should have a sense of comfort level from the Conservation Commission over how many samples is okay,
Well-
right? Like,
I'd be comfortable with just saying whenever that person starts to feel uncomfortable with the number.
okay.
I mean, I'll be that person. I have no problem with that. I'm through there all the time.
Yeah, me too. So maybe Dave and I can.
Drew and I can do it together.
Okay.
Yeah, and if we get uncomfortable with where it's headed, we'll just say no.
Yeah, I think we'll work it out. I'm sure.
It doesn't sound like a big deal.
No, it's not a big deal, but I just don't want to just have her go out and start.
No, and I think that's
Smashing
the right
things.
approach.
Right.
So have her get back through you, so you can coordinate with these two, Dave and.
Yeah, we can reach out to her.
So would it be wrong, is it too overt for me to suggest that you motion to approve pending individual review by Drew and Dave?
So moved.
Nope.
Second.
No, that's what I would say. I would say we're approving this conditional upon
I would have said oversight.
Oversight of the commission.
Okay.
That's what I'll say.
Yeah.
That's a better motion.
Just so that it didn't have to come back next month, I guess.
No, we don't want to.
Yeah.
No, we don't want to talk about this again. So it's
Well, we
conditional.
want a report from you two.
We would like a report, and actually, we did approve several other research projects, and including that, do you remember the Emerald Ash Borer study? And they came, I believe.
Yep.
So I think it would be good to have those folks back.
Unless she
some point.
fractures a rock and there's a huge diamond in the middle.
Good luck with
You
that
might
one.
never see us
Property
again.
of the town. now.
Okay, so we have a motion. Would anyone second it?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Okay, so that's that one. Property management, do you want to talk about the gate?
Yeah, so seasonally, we talked about closing the gate at the McDonald Conservation Area. This property is south south of town on Linden Street. Some people call it the second bridge, where the Exeter River crosses under Linden Street. There's a conservation land. It's privately held easement. We hold, or the town holds the conservation easement on it. Over the winter months, there tends to be a lot of dumping and potential drug use and some other issues. And so we had last year seasonally closed it. And so and the time frame that we closed it was November to March 31st. So we're in that window. You already approved that. It wasn't a trial closure, so I don't think that we need any action from you, with exception of the way that we've been able to manage this is the gates have been opened and closed by volunteers in town. They've just been kind of gate stewards. So every single morning, someone goes out there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and every single night at sunset, someone goes out there. And so those gate stewards, I thought it would be nice to recognize them for their support. They include Brian and Laura McSweeney, David Kovar, Cheyenne Venturini, and the property owner, which is Diane Arnheim.
I want to thank them a lot for doing that, because getting the gate open, especially during the spring and summer and early fall season, has been a boon to the fishermen and anyone else who wants to enjoy, the McDonald property. So kudos to them. Thank them, and they did a great job, and hopefully they'll continue to do that.
Yeah.
And just a note for the public, if anyone is watching, you are still able to head in park right at the entrance to the gate and fit 2 cars side by side. It's very tight, but you can physically do it. So you can still access the property there. It just doesn't provide this large space for nefarious stuff to happen.
Okay, thank you for that and all the work that goes into that. Rains Farm. We have an outreach event.
Yeah, so Rains Farm, you approved the funds to do the Phase 1B archaeological investigation, and they are going out to, this is in support of the ADA accessible parking south of the barn. So we have the archaeologists heading out to mark the site. In order for them to do their test pits, they need DigSafe to come out and mark utilities. Once they mark the area, then Public Works will also go to be sure there are no town utilities within the area. I don't think we have an issue, but it's just precautionary. So I just wanted to give you an update that we're still making progress there. They expect to, next week is when, so Wednesday they're going to mark the site, and then the following week is when they expect to do the archaeological stuff.
Wow,
Archaeological
exciting.
magic. It is.
Are you going to go out there when that's happening?
Yeah.
Take some pictures?
Yeah.
Neat. Very cool. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay, in the pin inspection of Mendez.
So one of the conditions of approval of accepting the conservation land for the Brissette Mendez property was that the following installation of the survey pins, the applicant and a representative from the town would walk the pin locations. I did walk it with Brian. I got GPS locations for all except 3 because my phone died, but I have a pretty good sense of where they were. It was a fairly easy navigation, so. All of the pins are in. The select board had signed the conservation deed quite a bit ago, maybe, I don't know, several months ago. And then Brian had to update some of the surveyed plans with the corrected map and lot. When they did the subdivision, the map and lot changed. And he picked those up today and we'll be recording it, I think he said on the 20th. No, whatever that Friday is, next Friday.
Okay. So it'll be official.
Yep.
And then will it be then conveyed to the town at that point?
Yep.
So then we'll have a new conservation land.
We will.
But the access to it is still
Yeah, access is still a challenge. There is no trail there. It does abut the Brickyard Park property. So and the deed allowed the opportunity for the town to install a trail in the future. But that would, take some design effort.
This is a new development sort of behind the Brickyard Park off Tamarin Lane, for those who missed that one.
Yeah, the wetland complex out there was amazing, actually. It was beautiful, so it's a nice piece.
Excellent. Okay, so the next item is Dave and Kristen, do you want to talk about the Bog Bridge?
I'll let you do that, Dave.
Well, as most people are aware, the bridge has been flooded for months now. The beaver continued to, there's the old snowmobile trail that runs under the power lines, and on the southern end of that side of that, they have kept extending and raising the level of their dam. And eventually it's gotten to the point, I've been in there for 20 years, and I've never seen the bridge flood repeatedly. And this has become a permanent situation almost. So I contacted several people off a list Kristen had given me that do beaver control, water control, dams, all that sort of stuff. One guy didn't get back to me. One guy is so busy in his own area, he's not even thinking about taking any other work on it. And this guy is just over in Sandown. And he was actually a trainee of the guy that's so busy. And I met with him. We went over the scope of the project and all that sort of thing. Basically to try to get that red trail, which is kind of the main circumference artery to the red trail that does the outside of the Oaklands. And right now that's cut off. It's semi-bikeable. You can get across the waters, runs 6-8 inches deep at the worst, but not for hikers. You just can't walk it. It's too slippery. It's dangerous. He took a look at it. One of his big concerns, and one of mine was, those marshes serve as reservoirs in effect for our groundwater and that sort of thing. So I don't want to drain it, but at least get it down to a manageable level. And he spoke that language. That was one of his main concerns also. He sent me the design of what he would do. Kristen, and I believe, forwarded that to everybody in the packet. It's a nice setup. He guarantees it for 10 years. And that should take care of it. We're going to, the day he does the work, we're going to get a measurement of the water height on the bridge. And then that plus probably taking it down another foot below that will be the extent of how far down we're going to go, which is going to maintain a substantial amount of water in there and provide the habitat that it always has, as well as the water storage capacity that it presently has. So, and he's ready to go, and he can get it done before winter. So that's where it's at.
And so we have 1,700.
So the total project cost is $1,700. I was able to find an animal rights, New Hampshire Animal Rights League offers grant funds to offset costs for installing these beaver deceivers. So these allow you to live in concert with beavers rather than trapping them out or killing them. And so they offered to pay directly to the installer $750. So it's not grant money that needs to come through the town, but they just pay the installer the $750. So that means the cost to the town for this would be $950.
And they also were familiar with his work once.
They were, yep. So they were pretty careful about who they issue these grants to. They had some follow-up questions, wanted to know how we selected this person. But it's a great, I don't know, it was a pretty simple application process and a great way for us to meet the commission's mission of managing this, multi-use area in concert with protecting the wetland resources out there.
Yeah.
When you say he guarantees this for 10 years, what does he guarantee?
Well, that it'll continue to function.
So he'll come out when it gets clogged or whatever?
Well,
Maybe.
the way it's designed, I don't really see how it could get clogged, because he actually encases the end of it, so that, and it's a very good size cage that goes around it. So that's not going to be an issue. And it looks like the materials that are being used look pretty heavy duty, and the association, which Tom's part of, I believe, because we spoke on the phone, has allowed us to use the back end of their parking area that's down closest to the power lines as a staging area. And everything he does by hand. It all gets carried in. They do their work. They wear waders. He might use a canoe too, I don't know. Trenches by hand, all that sort of thing. And it's a fairly quick process, 1 or 2 days, and they're done.
Yeah, I mean, I know, and again, it's just been some advancements made in the beaver deceivers, but you probably remember down Stratham Circle, years and years ago, there was an issue, I don't know if you were down there then, that they put a beaver deceiver in, but it kept failing. Or the beaver kept deceiving the deceiver.
On Union Road.
Was that where it was? I thought it was in Stratham Circle, that pond there, but anyways.
Well, Union Road used to be the big beaver problem.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that was Freddie doing it too. Fred Hutton. So beavers can deceive Fred.
Well, I think.
Yeah, they can.
So we're talking about returning it to a pre-level. We're not reducing it to anything here.
No, I don't want to do that.
And we don't there's no wetland permit requirement for this work because it's animal.
There's no equipment involved.
Yeah, so my understanding is you are able to manage beaver on your own property if infrastructure is threatened, provided you don't have any equipment in the wetland area. But I did send an email to Evan just to confirm that. I've not heard back, but I can follow up. Connor, is that your interpretation of it?
Yeah, if anything, it would be like a notification permit where we just installed a culvert in a wetland because it kept overflowing. It was just a notification kind of thing. They do ask for specifics, which I think we have. I don't know where they pulled 12 inches from. I assume that's just standard for their
He actually, when I first contacted him, he actually had me send him the coordinates of the area we wanted to do. And then from that, he was able to pull down a map out the size of the watershed there.
Oh, okay, so it wasn't just like.
And he calculated from that what he's going to need for pipe width, because he's got multiple diameters that he'll use, and that's what he came up with.
Well, and if it backs up, it just means it backs up a bit, right?
Just back to normal.
It would be back to a slightly higher level.
It is, I believe, a prime wetland. I don't know where.
I would think so, yeah.
Not sure. I think it is. Huh?
I would think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
It's going to fall into a different rule.
It's good old PRA.
Classification now.
As discussed.
And
it would still just be a notification.
We have had some public or we had a comment from someone regarding this and concern that somebody was gonna go out and alter the beaver dam.
Yeah, that was me.
Tom.
I observed an individual tearing the dam open in November of 2019. And when I asked him what he was doing, he said he had permission of the town. He was with the Newfield Snowmobile Club. And so, I asked about it back then. And so I think, I'm surprised no one's gone in there already.
Right.
Whether it's the bike crew or the snowmobile guys, and said, well, we're gonna fix this ourselves.
Right.
So Dave did do some, in terms of bike crew anyway, some outreach through the Fort Rock Riders.
Well, we did a lot of
Facebook page.
a lot of legwork on trying to figure out alternatives to getting that bridge reopened. And at the end of the day, this just made the most sense. It was going to be the best solution, and it was going to be the easiest one to get to.
It does provide a demonstration of this technology in a somewhat visible, I don't know how visible the actual location, but I assume it would be visible.
Not really.
No?
No. It's pretty flooded.
Yeah, it's going to be fairly tucked in there.
Even once
That's a massive,
because it's
swamp is very
Massive.
large, so
Yeah.
the trail is
in the middle of it.
400 or 500 feet at least away from where the dam is.
Yeah, and even when the water goes down, I still don't think you're going to be walking out there because my dog was swimming. So, a foot and a half down isn't going to take it down to dry ground.
Did you say 1.5 feet or 12 inches?
Well, no, if you go the foot below the bridge, say, plus whatever's on top of the bridge now, the flooded stage, that's about where we want to end up. I'm going to go out there with the guy the day of so that we can get an exact calculation of what it's going to take to get it down to the level that we want to maintain it at.
I feel like a foot below the bridge is unnecessary, but I'll leave it for the.
I mean,
You think it should be less?
I'd like to do it as little as possible,
I
but
don't know what number works, but.
No, I mean, you want more than
No,
that?
I think,
I guess what I want to make sure is that ultimately that trail remains open. And this is where I might defer to him even. He might say, okay, there's 6 inches of water on top of the bridge. We can go another 6 inch, we can go a foot deeper, and it's going to maintain at that level based upon what I'm going to install.
Yeah.
And if he says that and I'm comfortable with that, and he's willing to live by that, then fine. Because I think the more water we can keep in there, the better.
Yeah.
There's two goals here, and I think they can both be achieved.
And it could be adjusted after the fact, after the initial install, if we decide the level is too low.
Well, yeah, because the inlet, if you
Just
notice,
raise the inlet.
yeah, he doesn't. They're not permanently fixed. It's held down by weight. So you could adjust the inlet and I believe the outlet of that. It's not just a straight pipe running through everything, and that's locked into place.
Right.
The inlet and the outlet have play to them, so it could be fine-tuned also.
Well, I would want to, I guess, ensure that if we don't feel comfortable with this, that we have some ability to make adjustments.
I'll make sure of that.
Well, a lot of it's going to be dependent upon the conditions. I mean, if you get, like we did a 4-inch rain, like we did a couple of weeks ago, it's going to change the level. So, I mean, the level is going to fluctuate, it's going to be different now than it's going to be in the spring. So,
yeah,
you don't want to send them out there every time the thing fluctuates, 6 inches.
Well,
it could do from a natural.
Sure. Sure.
Well, that's
There's
what,
going to be
he's got to have a little bit of a buffer built in there.
Some play, yeah.
Yeah.
So are you looking for a motion to authorize a certain amount of money for this?
The expenditure of up to $950 from the Conservation Fund for the installation of a beaver pipe in order to reduce flooding of the trail on the Red Trail at Oaklands.
Move that we appropriate $950 from the Conservation Fund to have the installation of a beaver deceiver placed in the conservation area that
Oaklands.
in the Oaklands that
Runs adjacent to the
Runs adjacent.
lowest level of the power lines.
Yeah.
lowest level of the power lines adjacent to the Red Trail.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? None.
Beavers
Motion
beware.
passes. Okay, well, I guess we'll hear more about that one too. Take some pictures.
I'll take some pictures, yep.
Exciting. Okay, do we have a wreath workshop?
I'll let you know what day is coming.
Okay, that'd be great. Yep, so the Rains Farm Stewardship Committee is hosting a wreath making workshop at Rains Farm on November 20th, which is a Saturday from 10 to 12. Ginny Robb is coming back to facilitate the wreath making with guidance from Nick's, is it assistant rec planner, or I can't remember.
One of my programmers, yeah.
Oh, okay. Wreaths are $30 a person, and so we'll have the wreaths pre-made, but there'll be ribbons and other natural elements that you can use to decorate your wreath. And if people are interested, they can email me to register at kmurphy@exeternh.gov. If any of you are interested in helping out that day, please reach out to Nick or I and let us know. We could probably use some assistance with parking or maybe refreshments or something like that. And we are also talking about having some sort of kids activity so that if parents want to come with their kids can kind of be busy doing other stuff.
Yep.
And also, if you have an abundance of pine cones
Yes.
or acorns, Ginny would love a surplus supply.
We could send people out into the town forest to get bittersweet.
No, no.
That accomplishes two things.
That's right.
You know what? We have a ton of oaks this year. There's almost zero
no
acorns. This is a hard year for the squirrels out
But
there.
a great year for beech
For
nuts.
beech nuts.
Yeah, it's a mast year for beech nuts.
Beech nut. You know what? I saw those. Yeah. Huh. Weird how that works.
I wonder when the squirrel apocalypse is going to happen.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So do we need a motion? Is there approval of funds? It says that on the agenda, but
It
I don't.
did not.
Do we want to approve? Do we $100?
I did not identify she told me the amount. I think it was, give
We
me
can-
2 seconds, 30, it's 50. $150, right, Nick? Does that sound right?
That sounds right.
But because people are paying for the wreaths, there might be some reimbursement of that later.
Yeah, so we can just, would it come out of the,
We do have some funds in the outreach,
outreach.
community services budget,
All right.
town budget
So
line item.
I'll move that we approve $150 for this event from the Community Services Fund.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? None? Okay, that one passes. So that's great. Yeah, if you need, we can email about that event as we get a little closer to it. Promote it. That's great. Okay, we actually have 2 meetings minutes to approve because we didn't do it last month. So why don't we take September 1st? Can we approve them as is? Does anyone have any? I read them and they seem fine to me. So
That guy doing the minutes now is doing a good job.
Daniel does a good job.
Yeah.
They're quite good. So unless you have any, Kristen, I'll make a motion that we approve them as is, September.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Hear none, that passes. The October ones, I had one thing, there's a time that's wrong on the bottom of page 6. It says 1:56 PM when I opened the hearing. We may want to adjust that. And then I happened to notice Todd Kiskovitz is spelled with a C instead of a K. So if we could change those two things, I'm okay with these minutes as is, as amended. Does anyone else have any?
Is that your motion?
I motion to approve them as amended.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, so we approved our minutes. Is there any other business that anyone has?
Could you indulge me for a few minutes? We talk a lot about invasive species. And we talk a lot about how to eradicate knotweed and Japanese knotweed and bittersweet and so forth. It was brought to my attention not too long ago that on town property we have planted years ago burning bush.
Those are gone.
No, they are?
They got cut the other day.
Where?
Down at the boat launch.
Oh, okay. I haven't been down there for 2 days.
Yeah, it was the talk of Facebook for one day.
Well, all done.
It was a pretty shocking difference because they were in full.
They were huge.
They were in full glory.
Yeah.
And I remember I went down there and took a look at them, and I called Greg up and said, "Yeah, no question, they're burning bush. This is what you can." And the next day, they were whacked right to the ground.
There's another place I saw, though, recently that had burning bush.
Well, there's a lot of it.
There's a lot of it, but on town property.
In Henderson, Swayze, there.
No, well, town property,
Ornamental, you mean?
Ornamentally.
Yeah.
And I can't remember which, but the one that had been brought to my attention was down the town
Don't
landing.
tell Greg.
Don't tell Greg? Well, no, I think, if we're gonna promote, sustainability and promote the right things, to have them on town property.
I think what it would
That's great, though.
I think thing would have been a little wiser though would have been to gone in and rip them out and then replace them with something.
Yeah, we should have a plan.
It was cause just these stubs were sticking on people.
Yeah. I was down there. When did it happen? I was down there late last week.
I know it must have happened Monday, Tuesday.
Well, I got to get down there.
I think I called Greg.
Okay. But there's another area I saw recently that again, town property that had burning bush on it, and I can't remember where. It'll come to my attention. But I think that's great that if we can bring that to the attention that, they really should be removed. The town should be setting an example, and
Right.
But a plan how to replace them with something
at the same time
is a good. We should have a plan moving forward. Thank you. You go way ahead of me.
That's the only time that'll ever happen.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other?
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to react that strongly. There was one more thing, two more things to bring up. One, David O'Hearn had stepped down from the Exeter Squamscott River Local Advisory Committee. And so we are in need of an additional representative. And so I can't remember, I think Teresa Walker had emailed Drew and I suggesting the commission, seeking the commission's interest or recommendations from Exeter.
Town of Exeter, I've been a representative for a long time. Exeter can have up to 4 people representing them on the Exeter Squamscott River Local Advisory Committee. And I know we could reach out, and it doesn't have to be Conservation Commission people because we're all welcome. But I mean, I mentioned at a meeting, there are people on the sustainability committee and other committees that this is good because this is, talks about the entire watershed. It brings in, it crosses political boundaries. And a lot of times in order to accomplish what we need to accomplish to protect the river and our resources takes multiple towns. And if we can get enough representatives from all these towns, we can be effective there in doing that. So, yeah, certainly, hopefully, if there's anybody out there, get in contact because we meet once a month, sometimes not every month, but we do a lot of the same things that the Conservation Commission does. But there's 12 towns, I think, that are in the watershed, all the way from Chester, the headwaters of the Exeter River, all the way to Stratham, where the Swampscott enters the bay. So please, you'll find it worthwhile if we can get some membership. Good, thank you, Kristen.
And then the other item, we've been making some progress toward planning for an Alewife Festival, bringing back the Alewife Festival in 2022. And we have another planning committee meeting next week. I couldn't get into my doodle poll. I got locked out of my doodle poll account, so I couldn't set the date or see what the most popular time was, but I'll be sending an email to folks to select a date. I think it's Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday of next week. So if anyone is interested in participating, basically it would be like an environmental festival. We booked the upstairs meeting room at the library for some environmental films. The library will be participating by having a story hour kids activity downstairs. And then I booked with Greg Bisson the Founders Park area so we can have some tables for representatives from the River Study Committee, the Conservation Commission, the Sustainability Committee, the Energy Committee, and I'm sure there's another committee that I've forgotten. But we're making great progress.
And other partners, right?
Yep. Yeah, so, but there's still some reaching out that needs to happen to make that so far. In Erlac.
Yes. Move on. Yeah.
Yeah, I went to the first meeting. It was good. If other folks are interested, I hope I can make this one. I'm not sure that I can though.
Okay.
But it seems like a good event for us next year.
And Exeter TV, Garrett Prey proposed the idea of having people design a mascot for the town. And having like a like a mascot costume that people could wear, and have like a runway parade of the different mascots.
I know you guys aren't old enough to remember WKRP in Cincinnati.
Absolutely.
TV show. The mascot was a guy dressed in a carp fish.
Nice.
Maybe they still have that. We can borrow that.
I just remember the turkey.
We failed to acknowledge that Bill and Kristen Osterwood are attending virtually, and they've been neglected here online. So thank you to Bill and Kristen Osterwood who have been listening in on us remotely here, and I failed to bring them in earlier. So sorry, I didn't see your hand raised, but. They've been here. I also would, the holidays are upon us. We had a Christmas event for a few years. That was kind of fun. Get together for the commission. Considering that idea this year, maybe January. I don't know if there's interest in any sort of gathering. I know COVID stuff makes it harder, but it would be fun to get together again. We did the little summer outing, and I think it'd be fun to do one in the winter. Whether it's an inside party or a walk or something. I'm open to ideas. If anyone has any, they can shoot me an email. Bill wants to host us again at his house, that's fine.
That was always fun. Yeah, and put on a great show.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the chair's role to host or not, so I'll have to talk to Bill on this one, but Hopefully we can come up with something, but I know it gets...
If he's on Zoom tonight, he's going to call you.
Yeah, he's going to call me.
Or
So the...
If you can pass the buck, though, why would you even, why would you even consider doing it?
Right.
That's right. That's kind of how I'm feeling. So, okay, well, we'll be in touch about that, but I know it's amazing the holidays are going to be here quick. So our next meeting's the 14th of December. Submission deadline on December 3rd. So thanks everyone for their thoughtful comments and time tonight. I appreciate it. So
9:37, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we're adjourned. Thank you all.
The place I found it.
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.